Hello, dear friends. As I was about to finish my article on the European Central Bank, I discovered this recent wonderful message from the Hopi Indians, to which I have given priority because of its spiritual quality. Opinion piece. Hopi message from White Eagle, chief of the Hopi Indians in Arizona. Maintain serenity in the storm. Have an encounter with the sacred every day. This moment is a door or a hole. You can walk through the door or fall into the hole. Resist throughout joy and confidence. When you take care of yourself, you take care of others. The ECB keeps interest rates at 0%. Expansionary policy and negative interest rates. It will not raise them even if inflation exceeds 2%. Lagarde warns of slowdown in the recovery. Banks bet on digital currencies. Drought and heat raise corn and soybean prices. Windows 11 will make millions of computers obsolete. Chinese floods tangle supply chains. Mass evacuation of people in China due to storms. Companies should invest money in saving ecosystems. Emergency broadcasting system to be tested on August 11. Spain will have the largest artificial intelligence center in Europe. Russia takes Ukraine to top human rights court. Let's start. Important words on the current world situation from the chief of the Hopi Indians, White Eagle of the Hopi Indians, native tribe inhabiting Arizona, has addressed this profound message to the world. In quotes, this moment in which humanity is living can be considered a door or a hole. The decision to fall into the hole or throughout the door is yours. If you consume information 24 hours a day with negative energy, constantly nervous, with pessimism, you will fall into this hole. But if you take the opportunity to look at yourself, to rethink life and death, to take care of yourself and others, then you will go throughout the door. Take care of your home. Take care of your body. Connect with your spiritual home. When you take care of yourself, you take care of others at the same time. Do not underestimate the spiritual dimension of this crisis. Adopt the perspective of an eagle that sees everything from above with a broader vision. There is a social demand in this crisis, but also a spiritual demand. The two go hand in hand. Without the social dimension, we fall into fanaticism. Without the spiritual dimension, we fall into pessimism and futility. You are prepared to go through this crisis. Grab your toolbox and use all the tools at your disposal. Learn to resist by the example of the Indian and African peoples. We have been and continue to be exterminated, but we never stopped singing, dancing, lighting fires and having joy. Don't feel guilty for feeling lucky in these difficult times. Resilience is resisting throughout joy and confidence. You have a right to be strong and positive, and there is no other way to do that than to maintain a beautiful, joyful and bright posture. This has nothing to do with alienation, ignorance of the world. It is a strategy of resistance. When we walk in the door, we have a new view of the world because we have faced our fears and difficulties. This is all you can do now. First, keep your cool in the storm. Second, stay calm and have authentic relationships. Third, I talk to the divine, make a habit of encountering the sacred every day. Fourth, demonstrate resilience throughout joy, solidarity, and above all, love and gratitude. European Central Bank. As expected, the ECB has left its key policy rates and metrics unchanged, while pledging to maintain an accommodative monetary policy stance to meet its inflation target. In other words, like the Fed, ECB policy will focus on the rear-view mirror, linking rate moves to actual interest rate changes rather than forecasts. Beyond the changes in guidance, the Council saw the euro area on track for strong growth in the second and third quarters with balanced risks. Where there was a surprise was in the ECB new language discussing forward guidance arising from its new strategic review and inflation policy, where the bank said that in support of its 2% symmetric inflation target and in line with its monetary policy strategy, the Governing Council expects key ECB interest rates to remain at their current or lower levels until it sees inflation reaching 2%. ECB maintains rates and pledges not to raise them even if inflation exceeds 2% from time to time. The European Central Bank has left the benchmark interest rates for its refinancing operations unchanged at 0%, while the deposit facility rate will remain at less 0.50% and the lending facility rate at 0.25%. ECB keeps rates low or even negative for longer to bring inflation to 2%. The European Central Bank announced on Thursday that interest rates will remain low for even longer and may even be reduced further. This is a context in which the price of money is already at historic lows. This is due to the new inflation target of 2% in the medium term that the monetary body has set itself following its recent strategic review. Lagarde warns of a possible slowdown in the recovery. The reason, explains Christine Lagarde, is the uncertainty generated. The president of the ECB acknowledges that although the recovery is indeed on the right track, this progress could be slowed down. The bank's intention is to raise rates once inflation exceeds 2%, not on a one-off basis, but in a lasting and consistent manner. Inflation has risen, although this increase is expected to be mainly temporary. She warned. The medium-term inflation outlook remains contained. Lagarde won over most dissenters. A significant group of European Central Bank policy makers opposed to the new interest rate guidance she gave on Thursday, but the majority won out and only two, the heads of the central banks of Germany and Belgium, resisted. Opposition to the ECB's new interest rate guidance. Bundesbank President Jens Weidmann and Belgian Governor Pierre Wunsch opposed the European Central Bank's new policy guidance, signaling a longer period of historically low interest rates. Finance. India considers gradual launch of central bank's digital currency. India's central bank is considering launching a digital currency, according to a senior executive, giving a clear indication of its intentions for the first time after previously stating it was studying the idea. Companies should invest money in saving forests. Companies seeking to offset their emissions can have a bigger impact by backing government initiatives to stop the destruction of forests and ecosystems rather than planting new trees, an environmental group said Thursday. Ecosystem destruction must be prevented. Bitcoin retreats. Bitcoin retreated after approaching initial resistance at $32,000. Near-term momentum is improving, which could keep buyers active above the $30,000 support level as bullish sentiment returns. Elon Musk again supports Bitcoin and says Tesla will accept it again as a form of payment. It reiterates that Tesla remains open-minded toward Bitcoin despite environmental concerns about the high energy consumption involved in its manufacture. Housing bubble. Home prices are rising at their fastest pace in history, fueling concerns that the new housing bubble has formed, which could result in an economic calamity reminiscent of the 2008 financial crisis. Drought and heat lifts corn and soybeans. Corn in Chicago touched the highest price in more than 2 weeks as warm, dry fields in the north reduce crop prospects for growing crops. Soybeans and both soft and hard red winter wheat also gained, while spring wheat in Minneapolis snapped a 7-session rally after futures neared the highest level since 2012. At the same time, Brazil is experiencing slow corn harvests due to weather-related planting delays. Silver is trying to recover after a big sell-off. Currently, silver is trying to get back above the $25 level, while the dollar is gaining ground against the broad basket of currencies. Teenagers are getting jobs. For many employers, teenagers are ideal employers. They often have flexible schedules, rarely complain about benefits, and you usually don't have to pay them as much. Biden order could make it easier to borrow. A key part of President Biden's executive order this month could ultimately make it easier for people to qualify for loans and on more favorable terms. The order, which includes sweeping reforms for technology, healthcare and labor, also directs the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to issue rules allowing bank customers to download their banking data and take it home with them. That would allow consumers to prove their creditworthiness to lenders outside the traditional credit scoring and reporting systems. Digital news. Emergency test on August 11th. The FEMA agency will conduct a test of the EB's emergency wireless transmission system next Wednesday, August 11th. Rafa Pal has revealed. Internet down. Acame has confirmed that a DNS failure has caused its services to be inaccessible around the world, affecting all types of websites, services and businesses that rely on its network. Websites backed up after worldwide outage. Many websites were down briefly due to an outage caused by a systems failure at Akamai Technologies Inc., the second major outage in a month related to the cloud company. Windows 11 makes millions of PCs obsolete. Current installation requirements will make it impossible to install the new version of Windows, even on PCs sold just 2 years ago. At first glance, there is not much difference between the minimum requirements of Windows 11 and the current Windows 10. The new version of Windows, which was announced last week and will arrive as a free upgrade later this year, requires at least a GHz 64-bit processor, 4 gigabits of RAM, and 64 gigabytes of memory. Many users with computers that appear to meet these specifications, however, are going to find themselves with the unpleasant surprise that their systems cannot be upgraded, even if they are powerful enough. The problem even affects many PCs in the Surface range, manufactured by Microsoft itself, that were launched on the market just 2 or 3 years ago. Europe. Hungary to hold referendum on LGBT issues in early 2022. Hungary plans to hold a referendum on legislation limiting school teaching on homosexuality and transgender issues later this year or early next year, Prime Minister Viktor Orban's chief of staff said Thursday. The European Commission says it's not against Hungary holding a referendum on the law banning showing LGBT content to children. It believes it is an internal procedure, but it continues to defend the infringement proceedings initiated against the text. According to Hungary, Brussels is clearly attacking its right to protect children. Russia takes Ukraine to Europe's top human rights court over civilian deaths in Maidan and Donbass. Russia is taking the unprecedented decision to bring a case against the Ukrainian government to Europe's top human rights court over a range of issues, including the 2014 Maidan coup, civilian deaths in Donbass, and the Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 disaster that killed 298 people. In the latter case, for example, Russia is accusing Kiev for irresponsibly leaving airspace open for civilian travel in the middle of a war zone. Spain. Spain recorded a deficit of 8.2% in the first quarter of 2021, the fourth highest in the Eurozone. The Eurozone deficit stood at 7.4% of GDP in the first quarter of 2021, down from 8.1% in the previous quarter, and a far cry from the record negative 12.3% recorded between April and June 2020, while in the European Union as a whole it fell to 6.8% of GDP from a deficit of 7.5% at the end of 2020. 238 migrants entered Melilla by jumping the fence. Massive influx of irregular migrants into Spain. At least 238 migrants of sub-Saharan origin have jumped the border fence of the autonomous city of Melilla in North Africa. More than 300 have tried in one of the largest incursions in recent years. The number of people injured in the massive jump to the fence of Melilla has risen to 20, especially 17 migrants and 3 cyber guards. The Bank of Spain warns of a possible upturn in doubtful credit in the real estate sector when the moratoriums expire. The Bank of Spain warned on Thursday of a possible upturn in doubtful credit in the commercial real estate sector, offices, industrial buildings, logistic centers, and stores, once the support measures in the form of guarantees and moratoriums introduced by the government to deal with the impact of the health crisis expire. Spain will have the largest AI center in Europe. Spain will have the largest platform in Europe dedicated exclusively to training and processing artificial intelligence models. This macro project, promoted by the company Eternal Mentis, is preparing to debut on the BMA growth market on the 23rd. The project was born from the private initiative of private partners who have contributed to the project an initial capital of 7 million euros of their own funds. Eternal Mentis aspires to become a leading operator in the European market with the capacity to capture a large part of the business volume generated in the continent in the field of artificial intelligence. One of the main levers to achieve this is the construction of the macro project that the group is currently building in LaGuardia, Álava, called Brain Mirroring Center, BMC. A court suspends the bailout of the airplane Plus Ultra and gives it 5 days to justify it. A Madrid court has suspended the bailout of the airline Plus Ultra, which has been given 5 days to prove the need to receive 34 million euros pending of the 53 million euros loan agreed by the Sociedad Estatal de Participaciones Industriales. The Cathedral of Burgos turns 800 years old, 8 centuries since July 1221. The first stone of this cathedral was laid, which was built on top of an ancient Romanesque church from the end of the 10th century. What is now the first Gothic cathedral in Spain was declared a World Heritage Site in 1984. It has recovered much of its original state damaged by the passage of time after the investment of 40 million euros in the last 25 years. The Guadalperal dolmen, the Spanish Stonehenge, emerges again from the waters. The dolmen known as the Spanish Stonehenge is once again exposed. As already happened in 2019, the dolmen of Guadalperal is again in sight of everyone after the lowering of the flow of the Tagus, and therefore also the waters of the Valdecañas Reservoir in the municipality of El Gordo in Cáceres. It is a megalithic complex more than 5,000 years old, discovered in 1926, and which was left underwater in 1963 with the construction of one of Franco's famous reservoirs. The archaeological teams do not rule out finding other sites of great value in the area. Spanish America. The Biden administration imposes new sanctions against Cuba. The US government announced Thursday the imposition of new sanctions against Cuban officials for alleged abuses against demonstrators, following the protests that took place on the island July 11th, which have been reported in the international media. Sanctions on Cuban Security Minister and a Special Forces unit for crackdown on protests. The US on Thursday imposed sanctions on a Cuban Security Minister and an Interior Ministry Special Forces unit for alleged human rights abuses in a crackdown of anti-government protests earlier this month. At least 21 deaths in several riots registered in 2 Ecuadorian prisons. Riots registered Wednesday night in prisons in Cotopaxi and Guayaquil in Ecuador have left a total of 21 deaths so far. Colombia accuses Venezuela of being behind the attack against the helicopter in which Duque was traveling. Colombian authorities have accused on Thursday the 33rd Front, a dissident of the extinct guerrilla Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, of being behind the attack against the helicopter in which President Iván Duque was traveling, following the orders ultimately of the Venezuelan government. Britain's Sanctions, Venezuelan President Maduro's envoy. Britain on Thursday sanctioned one of the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro envoys named Alex Saab in connection with an allegedly corrupt deal to obtain supplies for the food subsidy program administered by Maduro's government. Venezuela rebuffs U.S. sanctions with first oil import this year. Venezuela's state oil company imported a key component needed to achieve its goal of nearly tripling crude production, defying U.S. efforts to isolate the Maduro regime's grip on power. New self-defense militia appears in Chiapas, Mexico, to fight organized crime. Like the Zapatista rebels before them, indigenous people in the southern Mexican state of Chiapas have taken up arms, although this time they said it was to push back against the organized crime gangs plaguing their communities. Tlaxcala Cathedral, a UNESCO candidate. The Cathedral of Our Lady of the Assumption in Tlaxcala is a candidate to become part of UNESCO's World Heritage Site. The decision was made this Saturday in the Chinese city of Fuzhou, where UNESCO is holding the 44th meeting of the World Heritage Committee. Mexico participates with the nomination of the Franciscan conventual complex of the Cathedral Monastery of Our Lady of the Assumption of Tlaxcala. It's one of the first Catholic cloisters in Mexico and is one of the first monasteries of the 16th century. Buenos Aires says goodbye to the Liniers cattle market. In Buenos Aires, since 1899, when the Mataderos neighborhood was pure countryside, it has now become a 33-hectare environmental problem due to animal feces contaminating the aquifers in the heart of the city. The huge trucks transporting livestock also create traffic jams in the Argentine capital, China. China evacuates tens of thousands as storms spread north. Tens of thousands of people were evacuated Thursday from flood-hit regions on central China as authorities raised the death toll from heavy rains that have inundated Henan province for nearly a week to 33 people. Chinese floods tangle supply chains. Floods overflowing central China and flooding parts of a major economic and transportation hub threaten supply chains for products ranging from cars and electronic to pigs, peanuts and coal. China offers oil reserves. China offered millions of barrels of oil from its strategic state reserves this month in an unprecedented move to try to quell inflation caused by rising cost of everything from food to fuel. Science and technology. Bacteria capable of producing fibers stronger than steel created. A team of engineers at the University of Washington has genetically engineered bacteria capable of producing hybrid amyloid silk proteins. The resulting fibers are stronger and tougher than some natural spider silks, which are considered some of the toughest materials on Earth. Mars' internal structure rebuilt throughout seismic motions. The internal structure of Mars has been studied through a series of seismic motions recorded on the planet, which have provided an estimate of the size of the core, thickness, and structure of the crust and mantle, according to a series of papers published in Science. Mars is confirmed to have a liquid and metallic core. It is detected a disk detected that will help study the formation of moons and planets, and an international team of astronomers has detected for the first time the presence of a moon-forming disk around a planet outside the solar system, a finding that will help study how moons and planets form in young stellar systems. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.